Welcome to lockerblogger.com. This is the 60, and I'm your host, Mike Bako. With the NCAA tournament just around the corner and the Big East tournament in full swing, who better to break it down for us than John Canchillian of WGTB, Georgetown Radio. John, thanks for joining us.
Absolutely. Pleasure to be here.
Let's talk about their season this year. As you mentioned, they had a disappointing year last year, rebound this year inside the conference, winning 10 games. Somewhat of a surprise, but a nice, strong showing. They were in the top 10 for a good portion of the year. Towards the latter part of the year, some home losses to South Florida, an embarrassing loss, and then losing to West Virginia on the road. Gauge for me their season this year, how they compare to last season, and what their hopes are for the tournament.
I think this team has high hopes.
Their schedule is very hard. Their RPI in the top 5 this year certainly will help them with the selection committee determining their seeds, but they do need a good showing in this Big East tournament to get a legitimate seed in the NCAA tournament.
Oh, absolutely, and I think Bracketology on ESPN has them right now.
Which every year, and anyone that does their brackets, they always have the 1 or 2 that has the 12th seed beating the 5 seed, so they may fall into that category this year.
Yeah, but if they beat...
Is it tough, you think, for Georgetown and other teams in the Big East to constantly be beating up on each other week in and week out, game in, game out?
I think it makes...
This year, there are a lot of big-name coaches. Obviously, the matchup coming up with Syracuse against Georgetown, two of the storied names, John Thompson and Jim Boeheim. What's the feeling inside the Big East just in terms of how many teams are in the Big East now? We don't have those name coaches anymore where you just think of Georgetown, you think of John Thompson, you think of Syracuse, you think of Connecticut, but now you have a lot of teams and the vibe and the atmosphere of the Big East tournament, not what it used to be in the past with this expanding of the field and double byes and things like that where it's somewhat watered down.
I think it is, but I think that we have a lot of good coaches, even at the lower end.
Let's take a little bit of a longer view and take it from the Big East tournament to the NCAA tournament. Who are some of your sleeper teams, and who are some of the teams that you think are ranked high but not necessarily good tournament bets?
I think the non-good tournament bets that are ranked high.
Okay, so let's backtrack real quick. So you think Duke, Kansas, Kentucky?
Probably Syracuse.
Probably Syracuse. Guess that. Does that #1 seed depend on how well they do in the tournament, or do you think they already have it locked up and the selection committee sort of knows, okay, wait a minute, if they drop to Georgetown, that'll be 2 out of 3 that they beat them. Even if they beat Georgetown but lose to another team, do you think Syracuse already has that #1 seed locked up?
A lot of people have been talking about the unimportance of it.
And that's it for this edition of the 60. Thanks to John Canchillian for joining us from Georgetown Radio. I'm Mike Bako. This is lockerblogger.com.